let me start this off. I hated making this. I hated doing this. Docking an Android handheld is the most absolutely abysmal experience that you can have. And if you could live any other way, you definitely should. But enough of you have bullied me over months, years, to make a guide on how to dock an Android handheld that I had to sit down and put myself through the torture of doing this. And this guide will not be perfect. I'm going to let you know right away. It will not be perfect. There's going to be things missing. There's going to be things that I could not figure out. But hopefully, with today's guide, you can get 90% of the way there, 100% of the way there, not 100%, 90% of the way there. And then maybe you could fill in the extra pieces with other things. But today is going to be all about how to dock your Android handheld the best way that I could figure out how. Now, today's guide assumes that you have pretty much set up everything. Like you have your emulators working, you have whatever front end working, all of that sort of thing. All of that is set up and ready to go because we're not going to go over how to set up RetroArch and all that sort of thing. This is going to be extra on top to get it to work docked. And just so you know, in today's video, I am using the Asus Rikiri 2 controller, which is an Xbox style controller with Xbox controls and all of that. I can't speak to how all controllers can work, but I can say that Xbox style controllers, Xbox control layout controllers would be the best option for you to get a proper docking experience. Lastly, I am using an AYN Thor for all of today's video. I would highly suggest if you want to dock and have a good experience docking, that you have an AYN or Retroid device. There's a few reasons as to why, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. For a dock, you can use anything. I used a random Ugreen USB dock that I had laying around. I would suggest that you get a hub. It just plugs in, especially if it's Thor, it just plugs in and you have an actual dock. That would be my suggestion, but I mean, you can make do with whatever you have. It's a dock. They all pretty much work. I'll leave links in the description to everything just in case you want to copy me exactly, but you don't need to. Okay, so for AYN or Retroid devices, because that's all I can really speak to here, head to Android settings, and then either Retroid or Odin or Thor settings, whatever it's called, video output mode, and you typically want to set what to use here, and you don't want to use adaptive default. This usually has issues with causing slowdown and all these sorts of things. 1080p 60Hz should cover most anybody, but you can play around with this to get it to a better setting if your TV supports it and you know what to put. There's also usually a few settings right under this if you want to change anything else, but you can leave it as default. It usually works for me. Not every device in the world will have these settings, like I said, but I'm covering it for those that do. Lastly, this does work best if you are using some sort of front end to launch your games from, whatever front end you want. I am using Daijisho in this video, but you can use whatever as long as it works. Okay, now I said earlier that this would go easier if you had an AYN or Retroid device, and there is a very specific reason for that. Our controller is Xbox style. All inputs show up that way, but depending on your device, you might be in a Nintendo layout, and you locked it that way. Or maybe you just chose that from the dropdown when you first set it up, and so you mapped all of your emulators in Nintendo mode. That's what I do personally. For a lot of emulators, if you were in Xbox mode when you first set up the device, the inputs translate over into an Xbox controller. And so it is very easy when you dock this that everything just works with an Xbox controller. But for those of you in Nintendo layout, like myself, it involves a lot more. AYN and Retroid devices make this easy because when you open an app, if you slide in from the right, you can make per app changes. For this to show, you have to have floating icon enabled, and on newer devices, you can actually touch the little arrow and make the transparency 0 so that it works and doesn't have a little white line on the right side. So what you can do here is just set the app or emulator to use the Xbox style layout of controls. And you might have to remap it for your actual Thor or whatever device you're using because now you're using a different control scheme. But this is much easier if you plan on docking. At least for people who don't want to use Xbox controls from the swipe down menu because that applies to the entire device. So when you're outside of a game or an app, it'll be Xbox controls, and maybe somebody wants Nintendo layout like I do. So it's all based on you and what you want. Long story short, there are a few emulators where I'm going to say that you should do this for, the whole floating icon swipe in from the right thing, because it'll be easier for you to do that for that emulator. So just keep that in mind. When I say that, that's what we're referring to. Okay, without waiting any longer, let's set up some emulators. And just make sure that your controller is connected to your device through Bluetooth, or if you can get 2.4 working, whatever it is, just make sure it is connected. That is the literal step one, which you can do via the Bluetooth menu on any device. Starting with Dolphin, head to Settings, GameCube Input, Settings cog on the right. Toggle Create Mappings for other devices. This tells it to use any buttons from any connected controllers. Scroll down and go ahead and map the controls if you haven't already for your handheld. So I'm doing it for the AYN Thor. Once done, start from the top, and for each button mapping, you want to click the 3 dots on the right, then add the straight line, which is a separator, and it means OR in this case. And then at the top, from the device dropdown, choose your Bluetooth controller. So for me, I see my Raikiri here. Then scroll the list of available buttons and tap the one that corresponds. So for A on a GameCube controller, that is normally B on an Xbox controller. So tap that. Repeat these steps for every single mapping. So you're gonna click the 3 dots, you're gonna put the separator, you're gonna put whatever button corresponds to on the Xbox controller. And so at the end, you're gonna have a full list of controls for the AYN Thor, a separator, and then the controls for the Xbox controller. Once done, save the profile and call it whatever you want. Then, when you open a GameCube game, you can now use either the handheld or the controller for each input. So both will work. And if you're playing any Wii games, it's the same steps for Wii. So just repeat what we did on the Wii side. Now, the big negative here for Dolphin is there's no hotkeys. So there is no way to map a way to exit the game to get back to the emulator. You're gonna have to use the handheld for that, unfortunately. Next up is NetherSX2 and Duckstation. Both of them work the same way. Head to Settings, Controller Port 1, and map the controls for your handheld if you haven't already. Then push and hold on each mapping, click Add New, and map your Bluetooth controller. This also works for the Hotkeys tab as well. So when you're done, you're gonna have 2 mappings for each button. One for your handheld, one for the controller. And you can use either, same as Dolphin. Let's go ahead and do Eden next, and unfortunately, there is nothing automatic here that you can do. You will have to open Eden, go to Settings, Controls, Player 1, and click Auto Map a Controller while choosing your handheld or controller every time you dock or undock. Unfortunately, while docked, there is also no way to open the in-game menu or exit with a Bluetooth controller. Next up is RetroArch, and this is one that I would say that you should consider using a per-app profile for Xbox controls with it, because it makes it super easy if you do that. If you do that, you can basically skip all of this if you have an AYN or Retroid device, because they just seem to share inputs. So your Bluetooth controller is going to show up as an AYN Odin or whatever, and you don't have to do anything. It works. Otherwise, for everybody else, map your usual controls in RetroArch if you haven't already in Settings, Input, RetroPad Binds, Port 1 Controls, and make sure that you save controller profile. Close RetroArch, reopen it, and now only using your Bluetooth controller to navigate, repeat the same steps to map your controller, and then save controller profile for the Bluetooth controller. The one hiccup here is hotkeys. For those doing Xbox controls on their handhelds, hotkeys should match up exactly, so it's fine. However, for those of you with Nintendo layouts, they just won't. The workaround to fix this is so long and convoluted that would be a whole other video. And even then, it doesn't always work. My site has a write-up on how to do this if you are interested in all of that. But you can see why I'm saying that Xbox controls for RetroArch is a lot easier. Let's talk Azahar next. And you would want to use a per-app profile for Xbox controls here if you can. Because if you do that, it'll just work. If you go to Settings, Gamepad, and use the Auto Map Controller function, and then choose your handheld. Bluetooth controls worked just fine doing that, with buttons in the right spots. For those of you that can't do that and are stuck in the Nintendo layout, you're gonna have swapped buttons. So A is gonna be B, B is gonna be A, and so on, unfortunately. Also, unfortunately, hotkeys are device specific. So unless you map hotkeys to only be used by the Bluetooth controller and never change it, there's gonna be no way for you to exit games, open menu, and so on. Let's talk Flycast next, and this one is very easy. Go to Settings, Controls, Tap a button on your Bluetooth controller to have it show up, and if it's an Xbox controller, it should automatically get recognized and mapped. You can just add hotkeys if you want, and you're done. Each controller has separate mappings in Flycast. Heading over to GameNative now, and this just works. No need to do anything at all. Surprisingly, the Xbox button actually works here as well. At least the first push, and it'll open the in-game menu. If you push it again, it is going to minimize GameNative. You just have to back out of the in-game menu and push A to get back into the game if you do push the Xbox button. MelonDS is up next, and this is one that you would want to use a per-app profile for Xbox if you can to make your life easy. If you do that, controls just work. Nothing you need to do as long as you mapped your handheld in settings, input, key mapping. Otherwise, you're going to have the same issue as Azahar with A being B, B being A, and so on with your Bluetooth controller, because there's no way to fix that here. Let's head over to PPSSPP next, and if you can use a per-app profile for Xbox controls, I would suggest that you do that here because it makes things easy. It should just work. As long as you mapped your controls for your handheld previously as Xbox, then the controller just works. Otherwise, for everybody else, it's the same issue as Azahar and so on, where X is circle, circle is X, and so on. There was no way that I found to have the controls separated by handheld and controller easily. And if you do the little plus icon, it just ends up duplicating the actual inputs. So unfortunately, I couldn't figure this one out. Lastly, we have M64Plus FZ. Once again, if you can use a per-app profile for Xbox controls, use that here. And as long as you set up M64Plus previously with Xbox controls on your handheld, controls all just work on both. Otherwise, aside from creating another profile and having to select that profile every single time you dock, I couldn't find a way to map separately, which means you're going to have the same issue again of A being B, B being A, and so on. One final note here, if your controller has an Xbox button, it might minimize the emulators for you, but it doesn't actually close them. You want to avoid using that because when you exit games using that, you're going to corrupt some saves or have some issues, and front ends are going to have some problems because they're not going to load up another game if it's RetroArch and all this sort of thing. Just avoid using it as much as possible. Otherwise, yeah, there are things missing from this guide, like how to bring the swipe down menu from the top and how to do some other things that I just don't know the answers to. So like I said, not a perfect guide, as much as I could figure out on my own, and maybe you can pick up the pieces on your end with other information and so on. This is the best I could do. Stop pestering me for a docking guide. This is what I got. This is what I gave you. Hopefully it helps. I'm sure it does. It took me time to figure this out. So hopefully you appreciate that and stop yelling at me about docking. But either way, if you want to dock an Android handheld, I would suggest you take up knitting or do something else with your time because none of this is fun. But hopefully today's video helped you with getting most of the way there. And if you do, or if you figure out more things, let us know in the comments so that others can figure that out as well. So I suggest that you browse the comments. Maybe there'll be some tips there. Don't forget to like and sub to help the channel grow. Come join me on the Discord to talk all about retro games, and hope you all have a good one.